Singapore calls on China to use its influence on Russia to help end its war in Ukraine. How will Beijing respond? Drivers getting some relief at the pump this week with prices falling by a few cents. And HDB raises $1 billion from its first ever green bond to finance its green building projects. Hello, you're watching The Big Story. I'm Olivia Quay. You can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you don't miss a single episode. Foreign Affairs Minister Vivian Balakrishnan says he hopes China will, quote, use its enormous influence on Russia to help end the conflict in Ukraine. He tells Bloomberg TV, I hope they will assert their influence with Chinese characteristics, which means quietly and discreetly, but effectively. Dr. Balakrishnan also warns that Beijing's decision in the coming days and weeks could determine the future path of the global economy. Well, China has stayed neutral since Russia launched its invasion of Ukraine 3 weeks ago. Beijing has not condemned Moscow's actions, only calling for maximum restraint in Ukraine. Well, here to explain what's at stake and what might happen next is our global affairs correspondent, Go Swinoy. Swinoy, Dr. Balakrishnan says he hopes China will use the enormous influence it has on Russia to help end this war. Do you see that happening anytime soon?
It's really hard to say whether China will use its influence on Russia to end the war with Ukraine, let alone whether it will happen anytime soon. Although there are actually those who say that the window for China's intervention really is quite small and it really needs to act quite quickly. So, but it really depends on Beijing's calculus, whether on the balance it is in its interest to intervene, right? And right now there is a diversity of views within China. There are those who think that the US, if this war goes on, the US will be distracted and will have less time for the Indo-Pacific, and that this will actually give China a freer hand in the region. This has happened before. After the 9/11 terror attacks on the US went to war with Iraq and it got bogged down in the Middle East. And this really gave China a good 10 years with which to build its ties with countries in the Asian region and to draw them closer to China. But there is also this factor of personal chemistry between Mr. Xi and Russian President Vladimir Putin that could influence the Chinese leader's decision. On the other hand, there are also other factors that might, swing China towards intervention. And this would be the mounting economic cost to China as the war drags on, as well as China's risk of isolation by the West and by other democracies in the Asian region if it continues to align itself with Russia.
All right, so Swinoy, let's build on that. What are the risks for China as this war drags on, both in the short and long term?
Right. So the most immediate risk to China is both economic and domestic politics. So China has set itself a very ambitious growth target of 5.5% for an economy that is actually losing steam. And this war is going to make it even harder for it to achieve this target, given the disruption to global supply chains, the high costs of oil and commodities, and so on. And already the World Bank is predicting that high oil prices could actually shave a full percentage point of China's growth. And really, this target to China is very important to maintain economic and social stability. This target is to help China keep a stable employment and also to meet the basic living need of the Chinese people. And this being a very crucial year to the Chinese Communist Party and to Mr. Xi, this is quite important. So this is the year that the party holds its 5-yearly party congress at the end of the year. And it really needs to show that it is up to the challenges that the country is facing, as this is about the legitimacy of the party. And at the same time, for Mr. Xi, this is the time that he wants to go for a third unprecedented term as leader of both country and party. And certainly some optimism in the economy would help his cause. And in the longer term, China's continued alignment with Russia, as we've discussed before, could really isolate China. And China's economy at this moment cannot afford that kind of isolation. China needs globalization to make up for the shortcomings of its economy.
Many thanks to our global affairs correspondent, Goh Swee Noi. She has an analysis piece on this, which you can read at straitstimes.com. Still on Ukraine, nearly 30,000 people evacuated from Ukrainian cities in the last 24 hours, most of them leaving the besieged port of Mariupol. For 3 weeks, the city has come under heavy shelling and aerial bombardment. According to the United Nations, over 3 million people have now fled Ukraine. In a show of support and also the first visit to Ukraine by any foreign leader since the invasion, the Prime Ministers of Poland, Slovenia and the Czech Republic met with Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kiev on Tuesday. Slovenia's PM telling the people of Ukraine, quote, "You're not alone, your fight is our fight." Back home, the sword-wielding man who attacked pedestrians and several cars near BUANGKOK Square Mall on Monday was charged with 1 count of voluntarily causing hurt with a samurai sword. 37-year-old Fadhil Yusop is accused of using a samurai sword to cut Mr. Amila Chinthana 3 times, causing injuries to his left arm and shoulder. Fadhil will be remanded for 3 weeks for psychiatric observation, and his case will be heard again on April the 6th. The Internal Security Department had previously investigated him in 2016, but found no indication that he was radicalized or intended to engage in armed violence. HDB has issued green bonds for the first time, raising $1 billion to finance its sustainable projects. The green bonds have a coupon of 1.845% per annum and are due to mature in 5 years. Housing correspondent Michelle Ng has more.
So currently, buildings in Singapore have to meet a certain criteria in terms of, say, energy or water efficiency. And there's also the BCA Green Mark with various tiers to evaluate a building's environmental impact and performance. So the funds from these new green bonds that HDB issued yesterday will be used exclusively to finance or refinance these projects. So these projects are already projects that are able to receive a very high standards of sustainability. 2 examples given are a retail project in Tengah and an integrated development in UT. So both projects, they already come with eco-friendly features planned right from the design stage. For example, in Tengah, the Tengah BTO has a centralized cooling system, a pneumatic waste system, which is an automated centralized waste system that collects all your rubbish from your chute. So being able to finance the construction of these buildings with funds raised through the green bonds, it really completes the whole sustainability circle. For starters, HDB said that they have picked 30 new buildings. They have identified 30 new buildings that could be used, that could be financed with this green bond, but the list will be reviewed every year. They have also said that they will issue at least 1 green bond per year, subject to market conditions, which is very in line with the government's push to develop the green bond market in Singapore. I mean, green finance is one of the fastest growing segments in the financial service sector, so it's definitely something that the government and the housing board can capitalize on. So I guess from here on, we will see more green financing, green bonds, and just generally ways to make our public housing projects more sustainable.
In other news, after a series of sharp rises in recent months, pump prices have generally softened, but petrol rates are still above $3 a litre. These price reductions followed a drop in oil prices, which comes on the back of ceasefire talks between Ukraine and Russia, among other things. And in sports, racing for the first time since the Tokyo Olympics. Joseph Schooling clocked 23.78 seconds in the 50-meter butterfly heat at the SNAG Major Games qualifier, and that timing earns him spots at this year's Asian Games and Commonwealth Games. Singapore's COVID-19 weekly infection growth rate continues to fall at 0.8 yesterday, the lowest since December the 30th. And for the 14th day in a row, the rate is below 1. This is even as daily cases climbed above 10,000 last night, with just over 15,800 reported. Out of the locally transmitted cases, some 13,800 were detected through ART, meaning they were assessed by a doctor to have mild symptoms. The other 1,900 were identified via PCR tests. There are 1,311 COVID-19 patients in hospital as at noon yesterday, 40 in ICU and another 191 needing oxygen support. Overseas, China recorded 1,860 new symptomatic infections yesterday, about half of the previous day's caseload. Cases are still concentrated in the northeast, with the biggest outbreak in Jilin province. Its capital, Changchun, is a key automaking hub, and Toyota and Volkswagen have paused operations there. Elsewhere, New Zealand will begin reopening its borders to foreigners next month, bringing an end to the so-called fortress settings that kept COVID-19 out for much of the pandemic. Vaccinated Australians will be allowed to enter without quarantine from April the 13th, and then other visa waiver countries can do the same from May 1st, including Singapore, the US and Britain. Well, those are our top stories today. Visit straitstimes.com for more news and our YouTube channel for more videos. Subscribe by hitting the red button below. I'm Olivia Quay. Thanks so much for watching The Big Story, and I'll see you tomorrow.